Thank you, everybody, for taking out your invaluable time to come
Oh,
and learn about
hello.
Samrat Ashok. We were trying to think about India's past as well as future, and Samrat Ashok come across as the important indicator to examine our own past. And we have an excellent speaker list. I think I'm personally privileged to be sharing the stage with this amazing people who have devoted their life and activism and their intellectual acumen to explore Dhamma through Ashoka, through Ambedkar's politics, as well as their own life experiences. I will just tell you, this guy had missed his flight. He came from Chandigarh, and we thought he would be not making it. But we are very grateful. He just came an hour ago. Thank you, Prashant, for coming. We also have Bharati Prabhu, who will talk about Atul, an expert in Dhammalipi, and Mangesh Dahiwale, who is, for me, an encyclopedia of Ambedkarite Buddhist thought. So let's begin. But before we begin, I want to acknowledge and celebrate the work of the great James Prinsep, who was the first person after the desecration of Ashokan sites in modern times to really bring back some of the findings of Ashoka to us. And of course, Alexander Cunningham and so forth, the legacy continues. And today, we have nearly 4 to 5 extremely well researched biographies of Ashoka, and everybody have their own stake on this topic. In addition to that, I want to also acknowledge one of the chief disciples of Sri Narayana Guru, whose name is Mittawadi Sri C. Krishnan, who was here in, in Kozhikode, who urged Guru to consider the option of Dhamma. And he kept appealing to Guru to choose a path of what he found a moment of salvation. And the great meditator, Sri Narayana Guru, of course, followed the path of Dhamma in his own right. But Mr. Krishnan ended up establishing a Buddha Vihara that today some of us went to. Let's begin with you, Mangesh. If our audience, because our audience, we know that Ashoka was the one that had primarily ruled India. Today, what we call the RSS version, the Brahmins trying to appropriate the Ashokan legacy by calling it Akhand Bharat and so forth. And that's a very cheap stake. But let's talk about, if you have to describe Ashoka to people, not least in Kerala, but rest of the India, how would you do that in your brief explanation of that?
I think that's a wonderful question about who is Ashoka and where we can find Ashoka. First of all, we have to understand that Ashoka is not a mythical person. He is a historical figure whose existence can be validated by so many things. So, if we talk about where is Ashoka, today, right here, just 100 meters from here, there is a Buddha Vihar, and there is a presence of Ashoka via the Bodhi tree he planted in Bodh Gaya, which went to Sri Lanka, and from there it came all the way here, just 100 meters from here, the venue of this particular discussion. So, when we think about Ashoka not as a mythical figure, and the other mythical figures like Rama, Krishna, Yudhishthir, they came in response to the Ashoka's dharma, which he called Dhamma. And for our country today, it's very important that we understand who is Ashoka in the context of the present today. So Ashoka was a great thinker. According to Charles Allen, his biographer, according to him, he is the founding father of India because he was the first person who ruled the vast subcontinent of Asia, Indian subcontinent of Asia, barring a tip of the Indian, southern Indian peninsula. He ruled all over the India, and that time India was known by the Jambudvipa. So he was the first person who founded this vast geographical landmass into what we can call, in today's parlance, a state or even a nation state. So Ashoka was the founder of the, what we can say, the India, in a sense. He was a thinker, he was somebody who philosophized, and it is not that, we don't have the evidences of that. We have got about 4,000 words written by Ashoka in the concrete, all over India, right across from Afghanistan to the Bangladesh. So, when we think about Ashoka, we have to think about the radical change that he brought in the world. Because in the history of the world, there was no other emperor as big as Ashoka. That's what S.G. Wells says. He says that in the constellations of the stars, Ashoka shines as imperturbable star up there. And his name all over the place, from Ganga to Holga, everywhere, his name is still alive. So I can go on talking much about him, but just I want to make a small point about Ashoka that, he revolutionized what we can say the Dhamma. His Dhamma was not sectarian Dhamma in a sense of Varna Dhamma or Varnashrama Dharma or Raja Dharma or Kula Dharma. He was the first person in the history of the world who advocated a philosophy of a Dharma or a Dhamma which was humanitarian in nature, which was based on the equality. He said that equality is the greatest virtue. And secondly, his Dhamma was not based on what the Brahminical conception of Dharma, which emerged afterwards, which is based on the ritual action. So if we have to qualify Ashoka's Dhamma, which he has qualified himself in several of his edicts, he says that the Dharma is about the universal humanitarianism. It's not just for the human beings. It's not just for one group, or it's not just for this group or that group. It's also for the animals. And I think there lies the great genius of Ashokan Dharma, where he has touched upon these great ideas. So, this is to summarize who Ashoka is. I think he is the beacon today for our country to walk towards. And I think his values are enshrined in our constitution, which we will eventually look at.
Thank you so much, Mangesh. I think, one of the things, it was not difficult to come up with the idea of this panel, but the difficulty was getting these guys to come because they are so engrossed in their own research. It was quite an uphill task for the organizing committee here can acknowledge to do. But I think when I proposed a few of the events to KLF, the first thing they chose was Ashoka, the kind of history that we need to think through, not only our own self, but through the lens of the Dhamma. And when we think about it, one of the, like Mangesh was pointing out, there's so many, written scripts, and some are discovered and many are undiscovered. And they say maybe 84,000 edicts to kind of compensate to the suttas that are existing in the Buddhist Pali canon. Atul, when we think about languages, right? I mean, you are an expert on caves. You've been devoting quarter of your life really deciphering and telling us the true picture. And one of the work you did, caves, most of the historical caves are Brahminized in India. And eventually after Brahminization, they become Hinduized. So wherever we see an alternative tradition of a non-Brahmin tradition, sect, practice, religious belief, it has now become very much Hinduized practice. Now, I went with you, and so we have three prominent languages. The way we see Ashokan scripts are available. One is in Brahmi, Kharoshti, Greek, Aramaic. And then you are somebody who is pushing to say there's something else we should call a different language, and there is a history. Do you mind reflecting on that?
Basically, Ashoka was the first person in India to write something on stone or any other medium. In fact, prior to Ashoka, we do not have any evidence of writing in India. And hence, we normally say that writing starts from the Ashokan period. Secondly, whatever Ashoka has written, and of course, due respect to all the historians, the archaeologists, and the epigraphists of the earlier period and even today, I would like to make a note that none of the historians or archaeologists have done justice to Ashokan inscriptions. The basic thing is, Ashokan inscriptions have been said that it is written in Brahmi script. Brahmi is a misnomer. There is no word of Brahmi in 2.5 crore inscriptions available in India. Whereas the Ashokan inscription starts with a sentence, Iyam Dhammalipi Devanam Priyena Priyadasina Ranya Likhapeti. All the historians have actually misunderstood this line and interpreted it in the most fastidious way. The line says, Iyam Dhammalipi Devanam Priyena. And people talk about, it means that these are Ashoka's religious edicts. The word Dhamma is translated as Dharma, which is absolutely wrong. Because when a Pali or a Prakrit language is Sanskritized, it changes the entire meaning of the word. The word Dhamma, which Ashoka meant, was way of living. Ashoka's edicts are not religious edicts, they are moral edicts. And Ashoka, being one of the most foresighted kings in the history of mankind, very clearly writes, Iyam Dhammalipi Devanam. That means, in this Dhammalipi, in this script, I write the following suggestions, following advice to my people. So, there is no word called as Brahmi. The Brahmi name came into existence in 1910 when Terindi Leucoporia, along with George Bueller, wanted to name a script which James Prinsep had deciphered. James Prinsep never wanted to name it as Brahmi. He talked it about Indo-Pali script, and later on he says it is an Ashokan script when he found in 1837 that there is some king called as Ashoka. Though he said, I do not have a confirmation in inscription. Ashokan name in inscription was founded in 1915 when the scientist called as Bueller, he found out the inscription where it is written in Maski, that is in Karnataka, ki Raiya Ashoka Likhapeti. Right? So first thing is that Ashokan inscriptions, the script is not Brahmi, it is Dhammalipi. Secondly, Ashoka's inscription, as I said, Devanam Priyadasani. People have put it as beloved of the gods. There was no God concept during Ashokan period. Ashoka meant, because Deva is a word, because Ashokan's inscriptions are written in Pali Prakrit. They are not in Sanskrit. So Pali Prakrit, the word Deva means kings or the learned, intelligent people. So when Ashoka says, Iyam Dhammalipi Devanam Priyena Piyadasani, that means beloved of the kings, beloved of the intelligent people, he proclaims and he says, because if you read Ashokan inscription, we find Ashoka mentions all the kings of the nearby countries, and nearly all the kings of the nearby countries in those days were following Ashoka. They were respecting Ashoka. That is the reason why even the Sri Lankan king started calling himself as Devana Priyena Piyadasina Asok, which led James Prinsep to think that all the inscriptions of India, which are found in India, were written by the Sri Lankan king called as Devanam Priyena. And let me add one more thing. Ashoka is the only king in the history of mankind who had the guts to say that I was wrong after the Kalinga battle, who felt remorse, and he was the only king who accepted his fault and said, I am sorry. None of the kings in the history of mankind has ever accepted his mistake. It was only Ashoka who did, and he had the guts to write it in stone. Right? That is the beauty of Ashoka. Right?
Excellent, excellent history right here. And you can see why I was so excited about this panel. I think, Prashant, you're somebody who are very much involved in, you and Bharati Prabhu, of course, started a movement called Buddhist Fraternity Council, and we were here for some time. We'll come to that later. But you've been reading, there's so many literature. Like, can you give us a scoop of what's happening with the literature? What do you think of the people who are here? What should they look forward to? Just to kind of get their bearing about the huge corpus of Ashokan life. Much of this is written, but much of that is still unwritten.
Yeah, at the outset, let me first thank KLF organizer and the team, and also my brother Suraj Ingole for giving me this opportunity. We know about Ashoka because Ashoka is in our memory. That is one thing. Now, how Ashoka is in our memory? Because of our cultural orientation, the festivals we see the everyday life we live that revolves around Ashoka's kingdom and whatever historical evidences we see. But what is happening in current time, there is a placement, there is a displacement, and there is a replacement. Now, if you see the new parliament building, where you will see capital lion at the center of the new capital. Now, what is that represent? That represents India's past and how India's future will be. Now, there is also so much appropriation is happening. Now, appropriation is happening that there is a reason because Brahminical intellectual class is not willing to tell us what is the actual story of Samrat Ashoka. Why? Because Ashoka was the only king who ruled in the heart of the people after Kaling War. Now we see that Ashoka before Kaling War was known as Chanda Ashoka, and then we see that Ashoka has been called as Devnam Priya. So this is in our cultural memory. Now this is one aspect, but if we see there are two ways Ashoka and the inscriptions we see. One is rock edict series and pillar edict series. So rock edict series and pillar edict series, they address us in a different level. There is morality, there are also policies, and there are also messages to the people of that time. Now, there is a content and form which is attached with these pillars and these inscriptions, which is not which is not available to us. Now, it is very recently we see that Patrick Oliville or Herman Ticken, they have started to work on Ashokan studies. But what we have merged so far, Buddhist studies and Ashokan studies together. We need to study these two things together, and then only, in my opinion, we will be able to see what is a realistic culture which revolves around Ashokan scripts.
I think this is a very important point as to how the practices that we have are much more culturally, the provenance of those practices are somewhere in the past, and it just has a different shape and different forms and different linguistic twist. Dr. Bharati Prabhu, I mean, you are somebody from Tamil Nadu, and you were very keen, especially in the discovery of the old scripts near Madurai. And we have the history, and then all of a sudden, growing up in Tamil Nadu, and then you come to bearing with, of course, there's Ambedkar, then there is the Dhamma that Baba Sahib talks about, and then you think about Ashoka. And just last year, both of them went on a movement in 6 states. They took the Ashok Ambedkar Dhamma Yatra, carrying Ambedkar as well as Ashoka's portraits and statues across 6 states. And it started from here in Mavalikira. And maybe tell us, as a Tamilian, how you looked at this issue, how it came to you, of course, a personal narrative, and what does this Ashokan legacy signify to you?
அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். I am very happy to sitting with the great scholar in India, Dr. Suraj Yengde, Mangesh Dahiwale, and Atul Bhosekar, our lovable brother Prashant Ingole. ஸோ கேரளா வந்து எனக்கு ரொம்ப க்ளோஸான ஒரு ஸ்டேட்டு. ஏன்னா என்னோடய ஃப்ரெண்டு செங்கனூரில் தான் இருந்தார், கிரீஸ் அப்படின்ட்டு. அவரை நான் பிரிஞ்சிட்டேன். அவரோட அட்ரஸ் எனக்கு தெரியாமல் பல முறை செங்கனூர் வந்திருக்கிறேன். அப்புறம் ஒரு ஸ்கிரிப்ட் பைபிள் வந்து ரீட் பண்ணது வந்து கேர்விஜா எஸ்டேட் அப்படின்ட்டு மூணார் பக்கத்தில் இருக்குது. அங்கே தான் ஒரு ஸ்கிரிப்ட் ஒன்று எழுதினேன், சென்னீர் அப்படின்ட்டு, பைபிளில் இருந்து. ஸோ எனக்கு லிட்ரேச்சர் கனெக்ஷன் வந்து கேரளாவோட ரொம்ப நிறைய இருக்குது. ஆஃப்டர் லாங் டைம் I found I have the cultural connection with Kerala because Kerala is not one communist bhumi. Kerala is a Dhamma bhumi because of Kerala, very great inspired from Buddhism in the name of Sabarimalai, Samiye Saranam Ayyappa. The Samiye Saranam Ayyappa, it's not the Malayalam, it's totally Pali language. Samiye Saranam Ayyappa, Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhamma Sastave Saranam Ayyappa, Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. So we are clearly aware about, it's a clearly Buddha vigar, but we are not connect with true. It is our practical problem. So here in Tamil Nadu, in our language state in Tamil Nadu, in Madurai, there is one stupa, the ancient Ashoka stupa. The stupa established, Ashoka was the first hospital for a human being and all living things in Madurai. There is one Ashoka stupa and a manuscript. And every day, every officers, every school boys, every day they are seeing national flag in the Ashoka Chakra, but we are not aware about the Ashoka. We are very innocent about Ashoka. We are not clear about Ashoka. Oh, Ashoka is an ancient king. No, no, no. Ashoka is the son of soil, is the real father of India. But we are not travel with the true. We are not travel with the true. We are not write true. The literatures are going on in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala, in around India. They are writing in Ramayana and Mahabharata. What Sita saying, what Rama doing. This kind of thing only we are working in our mind because we are not believe true. If we are believe the true, we can find easily Ashoka. We can aware about Ashoka, our ancient father of India. Now we are very clear, our Mahatma Gandhi, father of India, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, so modern father of India, and we need to understand Ashoka is the ancient father of India in the world. Now we have the so many world, the communist world or Buddhist world or any European worlds. The world copy from Ashoka only. The communist people, they have so many history about the Stalin and the communists in Russia. They are saying the Stalin only started, he was only started the 5 years plans in Russia secretly. Brother and sister, we need to understand the 5 years plan started by only Dhamma Vijay and Ashoka in India. And here no, we have the traditional 5 years administration, 5 years plan, and the releasing of prisoners in the good man birthday and celebration day. It was started from the Ashoka, the birthday of the Bhagavan Buddha, the birthday for all Buddhist monks. Brother, so I am not, so in South India, we have so many evidence, the real evidence, true evidence, but our mind is not adopt the truth. That is the situation of at the present.
It's very interesting. I think, so one of the examples of appropriation has been happening frantically. Much of the genius of Brahmanism in India is its lack of creativity. It has never been creative. It has always operated on whatever available to just reconvert. And one of the things that what struck me, what Atul was saying, the meaning of a word, if it's Sanskritized as opposed to think through the mukha or the mouth of Buddha, the meaning changes. The word might appear the same, the context and the meaning in the transliteration just appears different. And I wanted to ask you, Atul, one of the things right now, the Ram Janmabhoomi Ayodhya episode is happening, and it's been again the tragedy of India since the last approximately 80 years has been about this divide of Hindu-Musalman. But that's not been the history of what we see the majority of castes, subaltern castes across India. The religious coattail is just a very modern relical foundation, especially the way we see. The temple where Babri was, when the desecration was happening, the Archaeological Survey of India was smuggling out the statues of Buddha. And that was posted on a newspaper. So what we see essentially is wherever there is a fight, somehow the Buddhist history tends to be just a second-hand object. Now, looking at what's happening to the multiple meanings of the way Dhamma is proposed, tell us very briefly in your 25 years of research, what all sites you personally visited and found that, oh, this is actually a Buddhist site, but it's not known as a Buddhist site?
Well, to start with, most ancient sites in India are the Buddhist caves. Throughout the country, we have around 1200 caves which have been excavated from the period 3rd century BCE to 6th century CE, that is the current era. Out of this 1200 Buddhist caves, the total caves, we have 980 caves alone in Maharashtra. The balance caves are excavated around Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Andhra Pradesh, Orissa, and West Bengal. Now, if you look at these particular caves, out of 980 caves of Maharashtra, 430 caves are appropriated. What I mean by appropriation is that wherever there is a stupa in a Buddhist cave, it is converted into a linga, that is a Shivlinga, and it has been started doing a lot of pujas and so many other things. Whereas the architecture of these caves, it clearly says that it has been a Buddhist period. It has been excavated for the Buddhist monks and basically donated by the kings, the landlords, and even the lay person across. Point number one. Point number two, if you see all the ancient temples across the country, there was a period that these temples were Buddhist viharas. The entire architecture, so whether it is the Tirupati temple, whether it is Sabrimalai temple, whether you go into Maharashtra's temple, the Puri's, Jagannath Puri's temple, because I have personally visited these temples, I have entered the Garbhagruhas on one pretext or the another, and then I have found out that the entire architecture of these so-called temples in the present day, they were the Buddhist viharas based on the archaeological facts. Even archaeologists would definitely say that the excavations which were carried out in Ayodhya, they were of Buddhist origin. Whether it is the pillars, whether it is the lotus which has been found out on the pillars, whether it is the carved architrave, everything was there which has been very surreptitiously, they have been shipped across at the nightly hours. Even archaeologists, even the ASI reports clearly states that in India, there have been all these temples, all these caves, they are Buddhist in origin. And let me tell you one thing, right from 6th century BCE to 11th century, that means for a period of nearly 1500 to 1600 years, India was literally governed by Buddhist culture. We can see the entire science, even today, which has been appropriated by the Brahminical culture, and they have imposed those sort of things. Whether it is the caves, whether it is the present day temples, whether it is the manuscripts which we see, whether it is the inscriptions what we see, most of the inscription, even the first inscription which Ashoka wrote, that is in Bihar at the Barabar caves and Nagarjuni caves. Even in those caves, where it has been mentioned that it has been donated to the Ajivikas, the word has been scrabbled across with some sharp object. Unfortunately, the person who did this could not scrap the entire inscription because they were engraved in granite stone. He could only scrap one single word so as to remove any other doubts. But unfortunately, for the person who did this nonsense, there was another inscription of Ashoka which clearly relates to the first inscription, and that is how historians have come to know about it. So you will see appropriation of Buddhist cultural sites have been done from, as far as my study goes, from the 15th century onwards in this country. And it is still going on.
Excellent. I think, so, taking that, you and I, Mangesh, were in Vietnam. And, you were looking at the Mahayana tradition in the Avalokiteshvara. And then you connected that with where Atul and I last summer went to one caves in Karle Bhaje, which was also, they worship that as one of the Ekvira Hindu goddesses. And then you connected to me to that part. But also, Navayan Jyot Lahiri her second book on Ashoka was trying to look at how Thai kings, and also we can see other kings in the region were inspired by Ashoka, because he was somebody to be looked up to, right? And then very interestingly in Cambodia. So one thing is, Hindu as a word or identity is not historical. The whole idea and the concept of Hindu as Hinduism doesn't really exist. There were two prominent markers, and we of course saw it here in India, but in Cambodia, where some of the kingdoms on the coast had their rule, Brahmanism and Buddhism, they are mentioned as that, and the warfare, and you can see that mentioned. Now, when we see there is also in Cambodia, Angkor Wat, where you also went, there were a lot of lingas. There was a lot of modern kind of 800 years ago history, and suddenly we see that Ashokan influences and scripts. You went to China, are also available in China and other parts of the world. Can you take us through that part of the world which we rarely see, which is Asian cosmopolis of the world?
I think this is a question that we need to think about very carefully, because the concept of Dhamma, as has been discussed here, is a very important concept, and therefore we have to understand the vision of Ashoka. And in the modern parlance, the vision of Ashoka can be declared in two words: Prabuddha Bharat. He wanted to make this Indian subcontinent a kind of the enlightened land, and not only in India, because when he wrote to the Greek audience, he's also talking about the Dhamma in the Greek terminologies. And I think this very idea needs to exhumed from the debris of the history. So as I was talking in the beginning, and will relate it to what Suraj was saying, is the Ashokan conception of Dhamma was, for the first time in the history, was a universal humanitarianism, where Ashoka cared not only for the human beings, but also for the animals. And he started hospitals not only for the human beings, but also for the animals. The another progressive idea that Ashoka had was that unless there is a harmony in the society, that society cannot progress. And he supported all the religious groups of the time, saying that their duty is to find out the essence. And the word he used for finding out the essence is sar. And at the time of Ashoka, the India was so developed that it is said that the city of Patliputra was 11 times bigger than the city of Athens. So you can imagine the India of the time, which was very different than what has been taught in the books, because the Ashoka has been erased. The phonological study or the textual study has brought to light that these mythical ideals of Ram or Krishna or Yudhishthira as a Dhamma Raja were created in response to the profound ideal, the realistic, pragmatic ideal that Ashoka created in his own being. And if we see this tension between the two ideologies, one is power-based, based on the Kautilya's Arthashastra, where the danda or the power is the essence of rule. But when we look at the Ashoka, the essence of rule is not the welfare or the power of the king. It's for the people, for the Bahujan Hitaya, Bahujan Sukhaya. And if we understand these two diametrical visions in the Indian history, with this we can understand the spread of Ashokan ideas as far as Greece to China. Because there was a king in China, in the Tang dynasty, his name was Yengde, who was imitating what Ashoka did in India. Many of the ideas that we see in the Chinese culture today have been brought out from the Indian history. Same with Japan. Shotoku, who is considered to be the founder of Buddhism in Japan, he looked at Ashoka as the ideal king. And in fact, when Japan wrote the first constitution, it was a Buddhist constitution. So if you look at the Ashokan sort of impact on the world across, it's very deep and it's very impactful. And then came the kingship, which was opposed and concerned only with the welfare of the king. And that's how they handpicked the Brahminical vision, which is about power. Isn't it? So you see, as Baba Ambedkar says, that Indian history is nothing but the history of conflict between these two diametrically opposite views of Buddhism and Brahmanism. Isn't it? One promotes democracy, one promotes equality, one promotes liberty, one promotes fraternity and the community and the free society. While the other, the Brahminical idea of a Dhamma or Dharma, as we see in the Rama and Mahabharata, which is nothing but the safeguarding of the Brahmanya.
Isn't it? All these things are ultimately boxed down to, safeguarding the Brahman. So coming to the point, this history of conflict unfolded also in Cambodia, where there were the kings of Brahminical denomination. And in fact, they tried to carve or destroy the Buddhist images, and instead of that, they tried to put the Shaivite images that you might have seen in Angkor Wat. So I think even today, as Amartya Sen says, that the founder of the welfare state, the idea of the welfare state comes from Ashoka.
Right. And I think, Bharati, you gave an impassioned speech about it. And just very briefly, if you could respond to why did you wanted Ashoka to be a popular figure? Because you created this whole 6 states rally over nearly a month. What was the reason behind it? If you could just briefly explain.
Because for true only we are doing this. It's not happened by only man. Dhamma chose us because it's Ashoka 2,200 years before person in the world. After the 2,200 years after, we are thinking about the Ashoka. It is the power of Dhamma because the true never fail. So here the people are thinking our history. We are thinking about always 500 years history or more than less. But Ashoka is our ancient father, but we are not aware about that. So we need to understand after the Kalinga what's happened in South India. So after the people are thinking Ashoka is not ruled beyond Kalinga because he don't want to rule in the South India because he stopped the war. After that, the Seren, Soran, Pandyan, Adiyan, everyone gave red carpet to Ashoka in South India. That is the fact. In Kanjipuram, in Klothunga Cholan, they create Buddha Vanam for Ashoka. And the important history we need to understand, we are very familiar about the Palani Malai Muruga. What is the importance of Palani Malai Muruga? Muruga have a whale and peacock. What is the connections peacock and Muruga? The connections between Ashoka and Muruga. Our national flag is a peacock because of in Bihar, the peacock is a very lovable bird by Ashoka. That's why we have the connections by peacock to Muruga and whale. We are very familiar about Sangamitra, the daughter of Ashoka and Magendra. So we are very clear Sangamitra lived in Sri Lanka. What about Magendran? Who is the Magendran? Magendran lived in South India, Tamil Nadu, in Podigai, the name of Magendra. The Magendra, it's called Mahatero. Mahatero, it's become Tero, Mahatero, Agathiyar. So, we have the history. Agathiyar is the father of Tamil. But real name is Magendran become Agasthyar. The Agasthyar lived in the support of Muruga. Muruga is the one of the king in Tamil Nadu. So, but here we are showing Agasthyar is the Hindu Muni. But Agasthyar Paka Buddhist monk. So this kind of history, automatically they are converted by the fake history. But our people never try to travel in the true history. That's why we are chosen by Dhamma. That's why we are prepared Ashoka statue and we are crashed from Dhamma Bhumi. So we are reached all Indian Buddhist, ex-Buddhist. All ex-Buddhist, it's called the Hindus. But we will reach the true at the name of Ashoka and the name of Buddha by Dhamma.
Excellent. Thank you. Prashant, you are an academic. Just for an academic audience, we have very academic people also sitting here. Do you think there is a possibility for a Ashokan project to be taken not through the typical elite lens, because you have a Ashokan kind of understanding of that, and as you said, so much of that is written in different forms, in different genres. If you had to do a research, of course, I don't want you to confine to one genre, but what will be the diverse fields you will be interested in studying Ashoka?
Uh, First of all, as I mentioned, there is appropriation is happening about Ashokan history. It's not only appropriation, but there is also interpolation is happening. Since I am using this academic word because of certain reasons. Now, Ashokan history not only is living in our everyday culture, but the narratives, the folklores, what we call folklore studies, or memory studies. That's another genre. So these interpretation around Ashoka's history is not happening. What we see, this elite notion which we derive from Western theoretical understanding, which is a top-down approach, and we rely, most of the time we rely on that. So we become dependent. So for me, if there is a possibility to develop certain kind of view or theoretical notions, that elite cultural notion needs to be deconstructed, and there is what I many times call, there is a need to de-Brahmanize cultural studies. And unless and until you as academic will not merge these two streams together, what is called mainstream and margin, we will not be able to see what we call as a objective knowledge or objective truth about Ashoka's history. So that is one. Now, second, there is also political project which we see, which happens around Ashoka's history. Now, these political projects are always taken to undermine what Ashoka's consciousness was. How? So, if we see historical trajectory, Chandragupta, who was a follower of Jainism, and then there is a Bindusar, father of Samrat Ashoka, who was following Ajivika tradition, and Samrat Ashoka, who later followed Buddhism. Now, to decline this trajectory, we see that Pushyamitra Shunga had killed Brihadatta, and that's how we see the Brahmin rule had started. Right? Okay, so this we need to understand, and to subsume Ashoka's history, the Chandragupta Maurya is always put at the front level because of the Chanakya and his Arthashastra, correct. To propagate Hinduism at a larger level.
I think, we have nearly 12 minutes, and I want the audience to also participate. So I want to very keen. I'm seeing many familiar faces, many admirers, many lovers, many friends, comrades. We have 12 minutes. Let's invite you, if you have any reflections, questions, raise it. And if you think you have a long point, you may reserve it for a private chat after, because we have, and when you are asking questions, just be crisp and introduce yourself, please, whoever it is.
Sir, good afternoon to all of you. My name is P.T. Velayan from Payyoli. I am the neighbor of P.T. Usha. My question is, in Kerala, for more than 1,000 years, Buddhism was there. It is on account of the attack by the Brahmins that Buddhism failed. Baba Saheb Ambedkar converted into Buddhism on 14th October 1956 with more than 3 lakh followers. Now, if Buddhism was adopted by Dr. Ambedkar, why did his followers did not follow him in embracing Buddhism?
Correct. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so, there's one hand there, the gentleman in the spectacles.
Hello, sirs. My name is Baiju Subhash. I'm coming from Cochin. Last month, I have published my debut novel named The World Secret. In my novel, there is a historian, conspiracy theorist, Hari, who is a strong advocate of the theory Ashoka is not great. He argues that Ashoka has built a jail where he kept his prisoners of war and entrusted its responsibility to a human monster named Giriga. and he was already a practicing Buddhist while he lusted for the pots of Kalinga, and he killed numerous Jains and Ajivikas in Bengal. And when he advised his citizens to stop slaughtering animals for consumption, peacocks were slaughtered in his royal kitchen. And sir, you said Ashoka is the only king who felt sorry for what he did and who was remorseful for what he did. So, wouldn't you think, wouldn't he have apologized to the people of Kalinga? Because as per my understanding, the rock edicts in Bhubaneswar, in present-day Orissa, were not in a tone of threatening. Were not in a tone of sorrow. It's in a tone of threatening, as per my understanding. So I wanted to, and one more thing, who named Ashoka, Devanampiya and Piyadasi? I needed to know your take on it. That's.
Yeah, we'll take few more questions because then we can have much more conversation. Anybody else in the audience?
Hello.
Yeah.
So there is a country where these mythical figures like Rama is given prominence or getting more prominence than these kinds of historical figures. So how does it happen, or is it a fault of our historical writing of India, or can we find a solution for these kinds of problems by bringing these kinds of ancient so one of the scholars opined that Ashoka is the ancient father of. So most of the people, I think that this is Greek to us, these kinds of knowledge and his contributions in this manner. So what hinders from making these kinds of historical figures as, or what hinders from replacing these kinds of these mythical figures?
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, there's right there. Firasat is there. Okay, after him you. You are noting down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am noting. Yeah, I got this question. You know the questions, right? Good. Very quick.
Caste we will get by birth, not by other karma, other activities. After independence, government given so many solutions, intercaste marriage or reservation, so many things. But we will not get a clear result. So any solution for against caste
Okay, good. Thank you. I think that's not the question for the panel, but we can talk privately. There's a last question I'll take right here because we really need to wrap up.
So I looked the history of my language, which is Mahal or Maldivian language. They say that it is Elu Prakrit. And I was wondering if after the Kalinga war, Ashoka's people migrated to several places in southern Asia, like in Indian Ocean, Indonesia, Maldives. So I wanted your
Correct.
ideas.
Thank you. And very briefly, you respond. I'll give you each, unfortunately, a minute each. Somebody recently pointed out that much of the so-called Hindu festivals also have a legacy, something to do with Buddha, but also Ashoka doing that and celebrating like Ram Namavi, but also Diwali and so forth. If you can comment very briefly. We'll start with you, Mangesh, and then we'll go there.
I will just respond to the question about why people are not converting to Buddhism, because they don't know history. And one who knows the history, they revolt. Like as far as Kerala is concerned, the Iduva community at some point of time, in the history constituted about 50% of the Kerala population. And Idara means people who practice the religion of the island. That's of course Sri Lanka. They were, majorly Buddhists. But as the history has it, they were prosecuted and made into Panchamada, whatever. So the point is, once people try to understand the history, and when they begin to see where they come from and what happened to their present social status. So if we map the social history of all these so-called Brahmanically oppressed communities, you will find that they have the roots in Buddhism. So conversion is a slow process. It's going to happen. And there are a lot of scholars all over the country who are exploring their social histories and roots and, finding out the truth beyond their communities. So I think that day is not far where there will be a major assertion where people will go back to their original home. I think that's going to happen, bound to happen one day.
Okay. Shall I continue? Yeah, I'll answer these two questions. One is regarding Ashoka, talking about Kali and all those things. The myth around Ashoka has been created by three books, Divya Avdan, Ashoka Avdan, and Mahavansa. These books are mostly hagiographies of Ashoka rather than being a biography of Ashoka. Therefore, the myth was created and he has been called about Chanda Aksha Ashoka and killing 99 of his brothers and nothing. Bindusara never had 100 children, first of all. So the question of killing 99 brothers doesn't exist. Second, after his 8th consecration year, that is after the Kalinga War, Ashoka embraced the concept of Buddhism. And that is why all his inscriptions after the 8th year, that is post-Kalinga War, they talk about Dhamma, they talk about mankind, they talk about welfare of his subjects. He talks about the present word, which has been used by BJP quite often, is Vasudeva Kutumbakam. This word has been basically implemented by Ashoka in his inscription when he talks about the entire nation is my children and I should look towards them as a parent. Okay? So, the myth of Ashoka has been created by these things. If at all you have to read really Ashoka, you have to read his inscriptions, translate it and understand it properly. Okay? The second thing is about, one of the person across over here talked about language. See, Pali Prakrit is the most original language of this country. Pali is a Prakrit, that is naturally evolved. So all the languages of India, they have evolved from Pali Prakrit. All the scripts in India, they have evolved from Dhammalipi, that is Ashokan script. Hence, when people have transported themselves from one place to another, they carried the language, and over a period of time, there have been a translation of this language. They have been merged with a local language, the local dialect, and you get a new language across. So definitely, even those language which is available in Indian subcontinent, they have been influenced by Pali Prakrit. Thank you.
So one thing we need to understand about the peacock. In the peacock, one of the time, it was the royal kitchen in Ashoka. After that, embraced Buddhism, the peacock became a national bird. Like in the ancient period, Brahmins, they are very tastily eating beef. Now the cow become a holy animal for Brahmins. So we need to compare that. So we are thinking Ashoka is very away from in our present life. But the two things we have, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The Ramayana is a totally story of Buddha. The Mahabharata is a totally story of Ashoka. In Mahabharata, there is one Arjunan. Arjunan is also one of the name of Ashoka. Arjunan, in the time of war, Arjunan said, I don't like to conduct war against our brothers, Pandavas. So I don't like, that time Arjunan said. The time of war, Krishna said, no, you don't hesitate for conduct war because you can't kill, I'm only kill, you are not like that. So, that Ashoka announced that stop the against the war. That's why they want to remove that history about Ashoka. That's why they wrote Mahabharata. So we need to understand everything we have with our present time, the memory of Ashoka.
Thank you, everybody, for staying. This was really, truly enormous to have you as an audience. The panel was also as exciting. I'm sure you have enjoyed it. It was historical. Let's give it up to them. Let's give it up to the KLF and all the volunteers who have been working here hard. Let's give it up for them as well for their hard work. Thank you very much. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.